Fantastic. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Thursday in the TEFL Development Hub. It's Thursday morning here in Spain, and it's also Thursday morning for pardon me, Ra I've completely lost my ability to speak. It's also morning in Nigeria for Rasheedat Sadiq, who is joining us today to chat about the fantastic topic of emotional intelligence. So thank you so much for joining us, Rasheedat.
Thank you, Teresa. Thank you for having me. It's awesome being here this morning.
Fantastic. So, I mean, you're an educator, you're a storyteller, you've developed this passion for emotional intelligence over the last few years. Really, what is emotional intelligence?
All right. So I think the easiest way to put it is emotional intelligence being an ability and also a knowledge. So it's that ability to be aware of your emotions, of how to manage your emotions, and then further on of the emotions of those around you and how to build a relationship with those people based on their emotions. So it's just being really aware of how you feel and how other people may feel and being able to really adapt and manage yourself and others based on those feelings. So the word feelings, emotions, take a key part. There are many aspects of emotional intelligence. So there's the emotional self-awareness, like personal emotional awareness. Then there's emotional management. So you're managing yourself. And then there's the social awareness, and then the relationship management, and even motivation, empathy. All those are other strands that you can build into emotional intelligence.
And I mean, you just sound so calm and so wonderful, and just is emotional intelligence something that is really innate to people, or can we develop it as well?
Well, just like most things, there's that nature nurture aspect. It can be developed. So yes, that's I think where I'm going to start is the good news. And even with those that have it innate, there is room to keep growing. So for those of us that feel we've studied it, we know it, you see that the more you know, someone says, the more you realize you don't know, and the more there is room for growth. So, and then sometimes emotional intelligence is not all about being calm and being gentle. So I'll give an example of myself. Like I'm lucky in that I do have a generally calm disposition. However, when I started learning more about emotional intelligence, I realized that I wasn't really good at managing relationships because I'm one of those that if there's ever a conflict or if I see any sign of conflict, I'm going to bury my head in the sand, hoping it's going to go away. I'm going to retreat. But for a truly emotional intelligent person, you don't do that because the problems will not disappear. You need to find a way to actually address the issues and then move on. You don't always, either bury your own emotions to accommodate others. That's not really what emotional intelligence is about. That's more of being a pushover.
I can relate to that as well, I think. Yeah. So obviously we're talking about emotional intelligence in the classroom. We've talked about it being about the relationships between people and how they can manage their own emotions as well. Why else is it important in the classroom?
So it's really important for a lot of things. And I mean, why are we in the classroom? We're in the classroom, first of all, as learners, because we want to learn. And then we, as teachers or helpers, are there because we want to help. And if we are not able to manage the emotions, learning cannot take place. Somebody says Maslow before Bloom. You have to have that sense of security, sense of safety before you can actually start to learn. And if you really want to reach out to someone, reach their heart, then they'll be willing to receive anything from you. But if they see you as someone that is harsh, no matter how much you try to drill in knowledge into them, they won't be able to learn. So if we do want learning to take place in the classroom, we have to think about really how to introduce emotional intelligence for the learners, for the teachers. It's very, very important. And it's been scientifically proven that those with the higher EQ do better cognitively. So they work hand in hand. the rapport in the classroom, the atmosphere in the classroom. These are things that promote learning. So if you're able to understand the emotions of your learners, you will know when they'll learn better. You will know the type of activities to use. For example, oh, these children are really worked up. I think I need to use like a calming activity to help them settle down. Or these children are so dull this morning. Let's go for a warmer. Let's go for something. Maybe it's an emotional problem. Maybe there's a general like an earthquake in the neighborhood or something sad happens and you see the mood of everyone in the classroom is down. You know those kind of activities to introduce because you are aware, first of all, of your own emotions and then of the learner's emotions. And then, of course, as the teacher, if you're aware of your own emotions, you're not going to be bringing baggage into the classroom. You've been able to identify that, okay, today I'm a bit tired. Maybe I didn't sleep well. So I'm going to make sure that I don't transfer any aggression onto my children. Or today I'm sad, I lost a loved one. I'm going to be able to accept that feeling, work with it. Sometimes it's not out of place to even share that with your learners. Oh, hi, everyone. I lost someone today, so I'm a bit moody. So can you all be a bit quiet for me? All of that, you're teaching them also about identifying emotions, taking ownership of the emotions, working through the emotions. And all of this is teaching them for the future and is also helping the learning in the classroom to take place.
That's just so amazing. I mean, what you're saying about kind of connection and making the classroom a safe environment, I think it's absolutely right that that's the way that students learn. And also what you were saying about us as teachers opening up about our emotions. When I was at school, our teachers didn't have emotions. They were, I
Or
remember a
robots, they
poem
were
like, "Where do the
teachers.
teachers go at 4 o'clock?" They were just in the classroom, they were there and that was it. They didn't have lives outside the classroom. And yeah, and as well that it shows the students that it is good to talk about your emotions and your feelings and what's happening. And I think particularly in ELT and English language teaching, we do tend to do a lot of happiness. And in the course books, there's a lot of happiness, and we need to do a bit more of reflecting what the real world is to help our students as well. Mhm.
Yes, yes. And
Well, I was going to say, so do you think kind of students' needs in relation to emotional intelligence are they different at different ages?
Well, I guess they are. I guess so. Because I was gonna say, well, everybody does need it, especially that aspect of identifying the emotions. I think right from the kindergarten to the adult learners, some of us still as adults are not able to identify what exactly we're feeling. So, I mean, I give a common example. I say, if you're walking on the stairs, for example, and you trip and fall, you know, you feel bad, right? But why are you feeling bad? Or a little child, it happens to a little child, that child is likely to cry. But why are they crying? Is it from the pain of the fall? Is it from anger at the stairs? Is it anger at themselves? Is it from embarrassment? And in a lot of cases, we're more embarrassed than in pain. In for most of us, even the really younger ones, they're for the kindergartners, it's probably the pain. But right from middle school, like to adulthood, you're more embarrassed than pained when you slip up, But you're showing an emotion in your mind, you think you're angry, but it's not really the anger. So being able to really identify, what's going on, even in class, if a child is not learning, as a teacher, are you upset with the child? Are you frustrated that you're not able to teach that child what they need to know? Are you anxious? Are you, there's so much that could be what you're feeling, but sometimes you don't know, and then you just start to yell at the child or take it out on the whole class. I've been teaching you this for weeks and you don't know it. What exactly are you feeling? You should be able to identify that feeling, and when you identify, then you can even go back to why am I feeling this way? Is
Mhm.
it because of something that happened to me in the past? Am I projecting my own past onto these children? There's a lot within emotional intelligence. The deeper you go into it, now, not everybody's going to go so deep. At some point, you might even want to look for a therapist or a colleague to talk to that could help you unpack some of those feelings. But, the more you think about it, the more you can work on it yourself. So, at the levels of adulthood or teenhood, we should be going into identifying our triggers, knowing why exactly these things are triggering us. But at the levels of kindergartners, it's just about, okay, what exactly are you feeling? Understanding that feeling, being able to express it. And for younger ones, once they're able to express it and they just hear, oh, a hug may be okay, at that level. But at least it's important that everybody is able to identify what it is they're feeling.
Mhm.
That's what I can say about the different levels, for age. But it also goes up, the more your language level develops, the more you can actually go into a deeper description of the feeling, of the emotion, of what's going on around you.
I was just thinking about that as well because I can't remember where I saw it, but it's like a color wheel. And so kind of at the outside, it's all the different emotions in different colors, and it kind of as you get closer to the center, it gets darker and darker, and that's kind of the intensity that you're feeling. So, even with a young child, they might know angry, but they might not know furious or all those different levels of anger, but
Exactly.
having some sort of visual could be really useful for the
Yes.
classroom.
Yes, visuals are useful. Visuals, sometimes even actions, and that's why you see people, something as small as the smiley face, that they use at those early years to like just point how you feeling today, and that can help. Of course, like you said, there are gradations, but you start somewhere, and then sometimes you even have that, okay, let it out, scream, the level of your scream would show the intensity of your feeling. It's just making people realize that, okay, there are levels to this, and you just become more aware of how you're feeling.
Mhm. So that scream, have you ever done that with your students in the class, just as kind of a tension release?
Um, well, I think once, because the day I did it, it kind of started getting out of hand. So they started enjoying the scream. So then I had the screamers that didn't want to stop. But I think if you have it in your routine, well spelled out, like, okay, this is how we're going to do it, and you walk them through, because it was kind of done spontaneously for me on that day. So it didn't go as well as I planned. We ended up just having a screaming match and we had fun, yes, but it took me some time to like calm them back down. But if you've had this as part of your procedures and you tell them even before you go into it, this is what we want to do, this is how it's going to work, and then maybe you take it outside. That could also be helpful, because we were indoors and I was just hoping the teacher next door wouldn't come into like, what's happening. Yeah, but I think it's something that can work, because that day, actually, like I said, we all started laughing. So I'm sure at the end of the exercise, the tension for everybody had gone down. But my
Mhm.
concern was, okay, my class was slowly becoming, out of hand. Yeah, but I was able to contain it with time. Yeah.
Mhm. Awesome. And I think you're right as well. It is about building these things as a routine. And sometimes the first time we do any sort of activity, we've got it really clear in our heads, but for our students, it's completely new.
Exactly.
And yeah, so you have to keep developing these things. Are there any other challenges to working on emotional intelligence?
Oh, I think there are sometimes, and then it depends on how you want to do it, how implicitly or explicitly you want to do it. If you're working implicitly, you might not face many challenges, but if you're working, really explicitly, and of course you're working as a teacher, so you are, including elements of speaking, listening, writing, whatever it is in your lesson, but you're focusing on an emotional intelligence aspect, you sometimes find people wary. And I don't blame anyone. Um, Teens can be vicious, for example, so you want to be careful. You having to establish that safe space. So even when you think you've established a safe space, there are people that will be reluctant to share their feelings. They are afraid to be vulnerable, and it's understandable. So as a teacher, you have to try um not to get exasperated, to be patient with whoever your learners are. Because even as adults, sometimes we find it difficult So no matter what level of learners, it's actually easier with the younger learners. They're gonna spill their guts, tell you everything about their family. They don't really understand, But once you get to a certain level, and then the deeper the emotional effect for the person involved, the harder it is to let go. So you find people, not really wanting to even touch base with their emotions, not wanting to accept. Because sometimes you even approach an individual, and for example, I say, yesterday I noticed that in our interaction, you were a bit slightly aggressive. I think you should do this, this, this. And you step back and say, no, I wasn't aggressive, because you don't see that. And sometimes you're
Mhm.
not even ready to accept it, and you just get upset. So as a teacher, you need to be careful how you're reaching out to people. I find that people find it easier to express their feelings in writing. It's kind of easier. So you can encourage things like journaling. But that's the main challenge, really, getting people to face those feelings, to accept those feelings, to even think about it. Because sometimes you ask people to think and they tell you they're blank because they're not really ready. They're afraid of what they're going to find out. So that aspect, is sometimes a challenge. But what I find works is that if you're ready as a teacher to show vulnerability and to show your human side, like you said, some of the learners believe that we live in school. If you're willing to show your vulnerable side and you take it slow, sometimes they're going to even tell you more, or they're going to come back to you, because at some point you can even tell them, okay, this journal of yours, keep it at home. You don't even need to bring it into school, but here's a sample of my journal, or
Mhm.
just do a sample model on the board of what could be in a journal. And then they're working at home and they come back to tell you that, oh, it's helped me. I've become more reflective. So yeah, there are going to be challenges around that. Sometimes there's also challenge around language use, but that's why you're there as a teacher. There's a lot of scaffolding that can be done. You can even use imagery. I think you already alluded to that. You can have them make drawings. You can include, emojis. What emojis would you use to represent your feel? And there's a wide range of emojis now that we can pick from. It's not just the smiley faces anymore. You could have the one that has a volcano coming out of his head, whatever, to represent different things. So yeah, that concept of, being willing to really dig deep, it's not easy for a lot of us. And then the fear of being mocked, the fear of being judged, that fear of really showing your vulnerability is something that is real in the world and in the classroom.
Mhm. And I guess as well, there's a lot of cultural differences, from country to country, from culture to culture, about who expresses their emotions and how they express their emotions and where as well. So yeah, again, creating that safe space and giving learners the choice as to how much
Exactly.
they share and how and when. Mhm.
Yes.
So I mean, I mentioned at the beginning, and you've mentioned as well that you're a storyteller. So how can storytelling feed into developing emotional intelligence?
Okay, so I love stories, and I think most of us love stories. Not everybody likes telling stories, but everybody kind of loves listening to a story in one form or the other. And it feeds beautifully because it's authentic. There's authentic language in storytelling, and then there's inbuilt empathy. If you listen to a good storyteller or you read a good storybook, you are transported into that book. And what is empathy? Empathy is that ability to really just feel or try to feel what the other person is feeling. And it's just a beautiful thing, because in a book there are different characters, and you can feel, depending on how the author crafts it or how the storyteller tells it, you can actually feel from all the different characters' point of view. And one beautiful thing about storytelling, and one way we use it to build emotional intelligence, is look at the story of maybe Little Red Riding Hood. I think it's a common story. And then you tell learners at the end to tell the story from the perspective of the wolf, of the big bad wolf. So you're now um yeah, he's the bad guy. But if you're looking at the story from the perspective of the wolf, you realize that, okay, the wolf is hungry and he has a right to be hungry. So what can he do? What can you do? So if you tell the story from that perspective, you might change the ending or you might not, but at least you start to have that feeling. So there are many stories that we can tell, and not to be I'm trying to be sensitive politically and culturally here, but there are some stories we look at from different points of view. So while as a teacher telling a story, you can either fiction or non-fiction, ask the learners to approach it from the other perspective. You can ask the learners to think what would happen if the other person was in power, something like that. So at that point, we're able to really try to think deeper. Another interesting thing we use in storytelling that helps with empathy and emotional intelligence is role play. So, you've told the story and they're listening, and yes, they're absorbed. But I mean, what better way to feel a character than then to act as if you're that character? So, I mean, if we told the story and then we're acting it out, I'm acting as the big bad wolf, you're acting as Little Red Riding Hood. And then we could even swap, so that everybody has that balanced perspective. You really get to feel some of those things that the person was feeling. So I'm using fairy tales here, but just imagine these were true life stories, or historically factual, stories. How much more empathy would you have? So it's very common. Like you look at, and it's all cultures. It's all sometimes not even within culture. Sometimes it's within socioeconomic levels. The prince and the pauper. You look at the other person and you just tend to have a better understanding. You can't really, it's not like living in their shoes exactly, but then you just to realize that yes, they're human just like you, despite the fact that they're from a different culture or a different socioeconomic background or a different religion. You start to understand a bit of, okay, why they do the things they do, and you become more accepting, even if you don't totally agree with whatever it is that.
I've frozen, or you've frozen. Oh, are we back? I think
Sorry
Rashida
about
has.
that. I'm
Oh,
not
no,
sure. Yeah.
we're back.
Am I back?
I never know whether it's me because there was a plane flying over at the same time. I was like,
Okay. Okay,
no.
so this seems to be me because it did tell me for a bit that my connection was unstable. So, but I hope I'm fully back.
Yep. It was at the very end of your sentence, and that's why I was
Okay.
pausing because I was like, is there another sentence coming?
Okay, so that's good. If it got to the end of a sentence, that's good.
And I think as well as developing their emotional intelligence, this idea of looking at things from another perspective, it really helps to develop their critical thinking about the world as well. Like you say, I mean, the wolf, poor wolf, he's hungry. He's always depicted as this really bad, mean character,
Yeah.
but he just wants to eat. And it happens to be Red Riding Hood's grandma.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
yep. Um, I mean, obviously, when we talk about storytelling, we do tend to think of it more with young learners. Do you find that the teenagers and adults are quite open to stories in the classroom as well?
Yes, I do. Interestingly, adults, like real full-blown adults, would love folk tales and fairy tales and children's tales for English learners or even like advanced learners, because I think it helps people just reflect and be nostalgic about their childhood. They like it. So stories like that work with really young learners or with adults. Now, with the teens, you have to be a bit more picky. Teens, even starting from like 10, between 10 and 18, they don't really like fairy tales to begin with, especially with time. Maybe they could warm up to you and your tales, but I know that I started with some of my learners, and then the first thing, they don't allow me start the story. Somebody says, is it a true story? And once I say no, you just see them like, that's for babies. So with learners in that age grade, I tend to look for stories that are either true or more realistic. So realistic fiction, or I look for true life stories that we share, and that really they're able to resonate, they're able to relate with those type of stories better. And then with time, then sometimes they don't really mind if you use other types of stories, but at that level they just feel I'm too big to be told fairy tales. Like I'm done with this aspect of life. Why is she bringing fairy tales? So they don't connect well enough. But with personal stories, they always love to listen to my personal stories, even if it's silly, because it gives them an insight into who I am. And then, of course, like I said, realistic fiction or true life stories, they're able to really relate. And we do a lot of making connections in their classes. Then they start to tell you, something as simple as a hairstyle. I know my class, they're 9, 10-year-olds, and I told them a story. We're reading a nonfiction about hair. And then I introduced a story about something that happened with my hair. And then I asked, can you make a connection? And then we just had stories upon stories upon stories. And I had to say, okay, it's all right. We're going to write these down because it's taking too much time, to tell in class. So yes, it works well with all types of learners, but you may need to find the type of stories. And that's where we come into, learner analysis, learners' needs. And that's also part of being an emotionally intelligent teacher. Sometimes you keep them like well logged and written. Sometimes it's just anecdotal, but you're able to know, and those topics and subjects that your learners are more inclined to, and then you can fashion whatever stories you're going to use in the classroom along that line, and they're able to really connect and relate with that.
Mm-hmm. And I think what you say as well about them making their personal connection to that story as well, that it's so important in terms of just the the relevance of the language to them as well, that which is always a thing for us in teaching English. It's like, well, how do we make this about our
Yes,
students as well?
exactly.
Mhm. And I mean, going back to this idea of the teenagers, have you have you noticed over the years that you've been teaching of kind of young learners being very emotionally intelligent and very open and then reaching an age and shutting down a little bit?
Yes, I definitely have, and I alluded to it earlier, and I don't know what causes it, but I think it's more of that peer influence and peer pressure. So they worry that their stories will be used against them. So they put up that shield. They're not sure who's going to use it, when it's going to be used. They don't want it to be used to attack them at any point in future. And then the internet age just makes it so easy their embarrassment to go viral. So they
Mm,
really want to be cautious. They don't know who's recording, they don't know who's typing up, they don't know who's sending anything out there, you know. And I think even before the age of the internet and everything, it's something like it's like a natural phase. They become less trusting. And as you grow, you realize that the world is not all rosy. You start to see things, you start to see real life. So then you're being more cautious, because then they have to really take a step back to try to understand the new world that they're getting in. So that is also, I think, a part of emotional growth. But for those that have support, it's much better, because then they already know what is safe to share, when it's safe to share it. And then they even have like someone at home or in school that they can reach out to, so that they don't have to bottle up. And because bottling up the emotions is also a problem, that sometimes leads to a breaking point, which is one of the reasons we need to actually be able to be aware, helps us to manage these emotions. So sometimes they need that outlet, but the situation they find themselves in make it more difficult. Sometimes, no matter how much you prod as a teacher, they're afraid, and rightfully so. They have the right to be. They've seen things happening, you know, and yeah, the issue of peer pressure. So I think also, if we're able to really get a system where even in the classroom, everybody knows that it's not right to make fun of people, because it's difficult. Sometimes you find just once one person starts to make fun, the other people want to be in with the cool gang. So you now have people, either they're bystanders, they don't really join to make fun, or yes, they're in on the fun too. Like, let's make fun at whoever's expense. It's rare that you find someone that's an upstander and says, no, this is wrong. But if that class culture makes it easy, then more people would be saying, no, 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 this is wrong. And the person making fun will feel, okay, this is not the place for me to do this, and stop.
mhm, mm. Yeah, I mean, so much of it is about building that culture within the classroom of
Yeah.
respect and like you say, people very rarely stand up for other people. Yeah, yeah. Oh, if only we could create younger versions of ourselves with all of this knowledge about
That
how to
is.
care for others. Yep. Great. Well, Rashidat, I don't know whether you've got anything else that you wanted to mention about emotional intelligence before we head off.
Okay, so I think yeah, I'll just mention a few other things that we could key into and maybe research about. So I did talk about calming activities. I did talk about warmers. So the place of meditation or mindfulness. So it depends on how you want to look at it. I'm wary of using the word meditation because it often takes a religious connotation. But the concept of mindfulness, I think, is something that we can also help our learners to build at any age. And it's never too late to start being mindful, just taking seconds sometimes to calm down, to really assess yourself. That helps. And then just discussing with learners, about what calms you down. So we're leaning into how can they start to manage their emotions because for some people it's just taking a stroll. For some other people it's taking a nap. So asking the learners to start delving into that part of themselves, what calms you down can be helpful. And then, of course, as a teacher, you can experiment with different things. For some people, it's music. For some people, it's the lighting in their classroom. So all of these are things that you can experiment with to try to help manage emotions. Now, in education, there's like a whole lot, even outside the EFL classroom. I'm not really going to delve in, but just so that we know that there's so much more. We're not only dealing with our learners, we're dealing with our co-teachers, we're dealing with parents in some instances, we're dealing with supervisors and managers. So the way we manage the students in the classroom may not be exactly the same way we manage relationship with others, but the key concept, and this would help us also in our personal lives, is try to find out how you can manage your relationships. Thank you.
Mhm, mhm. And I think as well, what you were saying, how we deal with our students in the classroom, that will be different to how a teacher deals with them in another class. So as well, creating this is how we do things in this class, and great if you want to do this in other spaces as well. Yeah, to kind of keep building that emotional intelligence with the learners. Fantastic. Well, Rashidat, thank you so much for coming along. It was an absolute pleasure listening to you, and you're clearly so passionate about the topic and about education in general. So thank you for coming along to share your expertise with us.
I've had a lot of fun.
Great. Well, that's our last live stream of 2023. We'll be back in 2024. If you're celebrating, have a fabulous festive period, and we will have a festive coffee break next Thursday. So keep tuned for that. Okay. Have a great day, everyone.